I'm standing in front of 200 of the city's most powerful people at the Vance family's annual charity gala. All eyes are on me, just a maid in a plain black uniform. Across the stage, the matriarch Eleanor Vance, the woman who tried to send me back to prison, is shaking with rage. Her perfectly manicured nails are digging into the podium. "Who do you think you are?" she hisses, her voice a low growl that promises payback. I just give her a small, calm smile and press the play button on the remote in my hand. This is the story of how I brought her empire of fear to its knees. But before we get into the how, make sure you're subscribed to our channel and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss our next story of justice. My name is Clara. 6 months ago, my world was just a parole officer and a desperate hope for a real second chance. So when I landed a job as a maid at the Vance estate, it felt like I'd won the lottery. The mansion was a universe away from the one I'd just left. All polished marble, silent halls, and the heavy scent of old money. I had one rule for myself: be invisible. Keep your head down, do your job, and get paid. My freedom literally depended on it. The master of the house was Julian Vance, a billionaire who seemed more interested in his spreadsheets than his own home. He was kind, but in a distant, distracted sort of way. The real ruler of that mansion was his mother, Eleanor, and everyone feared her. Her presence was like a drop in temperature. She moved through the halls like a predator, her eyes scanning for the tiniest flaw. A fingerprint on a silver frame, a pillow out of place, a nervous glance held for a second too long. Any of it could earn you a quiet, soul-crushing lecture, or worse, you were just fired on the spot. I watched her fire a gardener who'd been there for 20 years because he accidentally pruned her prize-winning roses a day early. I saw her make a young chef cry because his soup was 2 degrees cooler than she liked. She was an artist of cruelty, and she seemed to enjoy the terrified obedience she commanded. Even her own son wasn't safe. She'd correct his posture at dinner, dismiss his latest business win with a wave of her hand, and constantly remind him of his duty to the family name, a name she controlled completely. The staff whispered that she'd spent decades building this fortress of fear around her family's fortune. But I'd learned a different kind of survival. Prison teaches you to watch, to listen more than you talk, and to see the cracks in any system. So I watched Eleanor. I saw her using a separate laptop for her private accounts. I heard her taking hushed, angry phone calls in the library. I noticed the strange gleam in her eye when she looked at the family's jewel collection. I kept my head down just like I planned, a ghost polishing the halls. And all the while, I was gathering information. I didn't know what I was looking for, but life had taught me that secrets are a kind of currency, and a woman like Eleanor Vance was bound to have plenty. It all came to a head on a Tuesday. The mansion was buzzing with tense energy for the big Vance Foundation board meeting. That morning, Eleanor announced that a family heirloom, a sapphire necklace worth a fortune, had disappeared from her safe. A wave of pure panic washed over the staff. We all knew what this meant. Someone was about to be sacrificed. She let the tension build for hours. Then she gathered all of us in the grand foyer. With her son Julian standing uncomfortably beside her, she walked down the line, her eyes drilling into each of us, savoring the fear. When she stopped in front of me, I knew. "It seems our newest addition has brought her bad habits with her," Eleanor said, her voice dripping with fake pity. "Such a shame. We really tried to give you a second chance." Before I could even get a word out, she nodded at the head of security. He went into my small room and came back holding a single sapphire earring, a piece I'd never seen in my life. It was a plant, and a sloppy one. But in that house, her word was the only one that mattered. Julian looked troubled, but he didn't dare contradict his mother. The police were on their way. As I stood there, feeling that cold dread of going back to prison, I saw a flash of triumph in Eleanor's eyes. She wasn't just getting rid of a maid, she was proving to everyone, including her son, that she was untouchable. That was her mistake. She saw me as a pawn, not a person. She completely underestimated me. Staring at the smug look on her face, a cold resolve settled deep in my gut. I was not going back to prison. Not for her. I was going to fight. I had 48 hours before they'd formalize the charges. My parole officer, who'd always seen something in me, gave me the benefit of the doubt, but his hands were tied. The clock was ticking. I called in the only favor I had. Maria, the elderly cook who'd always been kind to me, had a grandson who was a tech wizard. I told her everything, and she believed me instantly. She'd witnessed Eleanor's cruelty for 30 years. Her grandson Leo was a genius. He owed me for covering for him when he'd broken an expensive vase a month back. I told him about Eleanor's secret laptop, the one she guarded so closely. I told him about the angry phone calls and the name I'd overheard more than once, a shady brokerage firm in another country. That night, while the Vances slept, Leo worked his magic. He cloned her entire hard drive remotely, using a network vulnerability he'd found weeks ago just because he was bored. As the files downloaded in the dark kitchen, my heart hammered against my ribs. Under the glow of his screen, the truth started to unravel. It was so much worse than I ever imagined. Eleanor wasn't just a tyrant, she was a thief. For years, she had been systematically embezzling money from the Vance Foundation, the very charity that was the source of her public pride. She was funneling donations into offshore accounts to pay for a lifestyle that even their billions couldn't cover. The stolen necklace? It was never stolen. The records showed she'd sold it through that overseas broker last week to cover a huge investment loss. Framing me wasn't just cruel, it was a cover-up. She was going to send me to prison to hide her own crimes. We had it all. Bank statements, emails, transaction records. Her entire empire of deceit, laid bare on a single screen. Now, I just had to figure out the best way to light the fuse. The annual Vance Foundation Charity Gala was in 2 days. It was Eleanor's biggest night of the year, where she got to show off her supposed philanthropy to the city's elite. It was the perfect stage for what I had planned. Getting everything in place was a high-wire act. Leo got a job as a last-minute A/V tech assistant and gained access to the main projection system. He embedded our files into the presentation slideshow that was scheduled to play behind Eleanor during her big speech. All it would take was one click from a remote he synced for me. The night of the gala arrived. The ballroom was a sea of jewels and champagne. I was on the serving staff in my simple uniform, an invisible girl refilling glasses. I watched Eleanor on the dais, soaking up the praise, her face a perfect mask of grace. She smiled at Julian, who was beaming with pride, totally clueless about the poison running through the heart of his family. Finally, the moment came. The lights dimmed and a spotlight hit Eleanor at the podium. Philanthropy, she began, her voice full of practiced sincerity, is not about giving. It's about legacy. My hands were shaking. This was it. I walked out from the shadows near the service entrance and headed for the stage. A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. Security guards started moving my way. Julian stood up looking confused. Clara? What are you doing? Eleanor's mask finally cracked. Her eyes narrowed into slits of pure venom. Security, she commanded. Get this filth out of here. That's when I stepped up to the second microphone. Before you do, Mrs. Vance, I said, my voice steady and clear, perhaps you can explain these transactions to your donors. And then we were back at the beginning of the story. Her face twisted in fury. Who do you think you are? She hissed. I just smiled and pressed the button. Behind her, the slideshow of smiling children vanished. In its place, a scanned image of a bank transfer to an offshore account. Then another. And another. Emails detailing the sale of the sapphire necklace flashed onto the screen, followed by spreadsheets showing exactly how she'd been draining the foundation dry. A collective gasp went through the ballroom. I looked over at Julian. His face was white, his eyes locked on the screen as the truth of his mother's betrayal crashed down on him. But my last look was for Eleanor. Her face had just collapsed. The rage was gone, replaced by the raw, naked terror of a queen who'd just been overthrown in her own court. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time, Eleanor Vance was completely silent. As if on cue, the ballroom doors swung open. 2 police officers walked in, heading straight for the stage. They'd received an anonymous tip, with a full data packet, an hour earlier. They walked right past the stunned guests and stopped on either side of the trembling matriarch. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the entire room. Of course, I was cleared of all charges. The evidence was undeniable. Eleanor's empire of fear crumbled in a single night, brought down not by a business rival, but by a maid she thought was nothing. The next day, Julian Vance asked to see me. He was genuinely ashamed and grateful. He apologized for everything, not just for the accusation but for being blind to his mother for so long. He offered me a new job, a real one, the new administrator of the foundation tasked with rebuilding it with integrity. I took the job. I had earned my second chance not by being invisible, but by finally refusing to be. I learned that real power isn't about shouting the loudest. It's about having the courage to speak the truth, even when your voice is shaking. The House of Vance was no longer a place of fear. It was just a house waiting for a fresh start. And I was the one holding the blueprints. And that's how the maid nobody even noticed silenced the woman that everyone feared. What did you think of her plan? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories where the underdog comes out on top.